I don't think that we are as divided as the media would have you believe. Knew it was coming. Would have you believe. Why do you think it is that people can't agree on what's true?
So I am bound by presenting the facts from the U.S. government, but there are people who don't believe the CDC or the Department of Justice or any governmental agency, but that is who I am required to get my facts from. So if you don't believe them to be a scientist that you're going to trust, you got to find your other sources too and look at all the angles and figure out what you really believe.
Is there ever any anger directed at you about that specifically?
Yes.
There's anger directed at you.
We had someone break into the live shots during the Fred Meyer shooting situation while we're talking about a tragedy in the community to be like, did you see the body in there? Is it real? People that go that extreme to dislike the media.
Right. Journalism, and in particular broadcast journalism, has become a very polarizing subject to a lot of people. And I think that there are several very good reasons for that. With the advent of 24-hour news cycles, it's become important to get the news out as quickly as possible, oftentimes at the expense of reporting things as accurately as possible. But I think they also found out that personalities were just as important to a large segment of their viewership as the actual news that they were reporting. Right now, anybody can turn on the news to have it presented to them by somebody who views the world exactly the same way that they do. And by nature of that, I think we've increased this perceived divide between one side of the fence and the other. All you have to do right now is turn on a TV to see all the various ways that the world is collapsing around us. But I've always wondered if that's truly the case. And I also feel like local journalism might be the best hope to get us away from that. So I wanted to talk to Tracci about the differences between local and national media, the role of journalism in a world that seems more polarized, and as well as the role of journalism in a world with ever shrinking attention spans. But if you liked it, make sure you subscribe to the channel to check out all the conversations we're going to be having with people down the road. And, maybe leave a comment about who you might like to see us have a conversation with. Maybe it's you. Maybe. This episode is brought to you by the Phipps Team and 509realestate.com. So if you or anybody you know is in the market to buy a house this spring or the summer, or really anytime ever, just, check that out. But right now, here's Tracci Dial. Hello.
Hello.
You are the media.
Well, I am a journalist.
You are here as a representative for the media at large. Is that right?
If that's what I'm here for today, then yes.
That's a polarizing thing.
It absolutely is.
So what is a day like for you?
That's the beauty of it. Every single day is different. Okay. I guess the high point of the day is when I go on and anchor the 5 and 6, where I am the media for the people who choose to tune in. Throughout the day, we're just gathering stories. I do a lot of management type stuff, interviews with people, editing, and then I anchor the news at 5 and 6.
Are you plugged in all the time?
Unfortunately, yes. I try to make a concerted effort to unplug at times because it's very important for my mental health.
Sure, I would think so. I don't know. We just kind of came out of, and obviously there's always some sort of calamity to pay attention to. But I don't remember a time where I was as plugged into what was going on, whether it was politics of the world, than the last, I guess during the previous administration, right? It got to a point where I became exhausted, without even really realizing I was exhausted. And it got to a point where I got kind of burnt out on news. I sort of just didn't want to know what was happening anymore. But I guess what I'm talking about there is more of like that sort of editorialized sort of 24-hour news cycle rather than just tuning in the evening to see what's going on in the world. Talk to me about the difference between local news and 24-hour news.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like 24-hour cable news and even national news compared to local news are such different things. Your local news, we're focused a lot more on the community and what's going on. We understand the importance of good stories too, and there are so many good stories to tell in our community. And we don't editorialize. I mean, even if it is our beloved evening anchors that we know, at the national level, you do see what side they lean. And we try really hard to make sure we draw that line in the sand right in the middle and toe that line constantly, because we all have opinions. I have opinions, obviously, but I'm not going to share that with you. I'm going to give you the facts on each side, right, and I want you to be able to decide.
Do you ever come across a time where you want to share your opinion?
And it was tough during the pandemic. I mean, sure, we all had very strong opinions about that. But in the end, I mean, it is what each person is comfortable with. We saw people break rules, keep their businesses, lose their businesses. And that was a tough time to keep my cool. And people really decided whether they liked or disliked local news. And a lot of people decided they didn't, because it is just the media in general. But I hope they do come back at some point and see that it is important to see what's going on in your community and maybe not be overwhelmed by everything.
You guys run into that even locally, because I can understand, like in a debate between, I can understand somebody watching, to use an extreme example, I can understand somebody tuning into Tucker Carlson and deciding, to put it lightly, that's not for them. I can understand somebody looking at Chris Cuomo, on the other end of the spectrum and feeling like that's not really for me. They do that? Locally, people do that.
The number of times I've been behind a bumper sticker that says the media is the virus should be funny at this point. And hopefully it's just coincidence, but I think a lot of people have those bumper stickers.
So I totally understand that when you're talking about a national perspective, when you're talking about the sort of editorialized, sort of personality driven media, I totally understand that being, I mean, for lack of a better word, I guess I was going to try to pull it back a little bit, but it's detrimental.
It is.
You mentioned sharing good stories. That doesn't happen on the national level.
There's just too much bad stuff to cover, unfortunately.
Well, is that the case? I think that we've become, as a people, as a whole, we've become, I guess it's a little bit odd to say with world conflicts going on right now, and in the middle of like people losing their minds during a pandemic, but like as a whole, as a species, we've kind of become more tolerant and less violent. There is, like since the 90s, there's been a precipitous decline in the amount of violent crime, but that doesn't sell anything. It's very, you are correct. I think that there is a lot of bad things happening all the time. But that is what sells beer. That's what sells medications.
That's what sells ratings even. And that is what's important, because unfortunately, as much as news is a public service, it is also still a business. That's why journalists do not get like student loan forgiveness, because it's not technically a public service, even though in its own right, it absolutely is. But it's about selling those ratings, let alone those commercials. And we've done research, even locally. Local news viewers want to know about crime. They want to know what neighborhood that's in. So we have to say, like, this happened down by Kennewick High School, the stabbing and the shooting the other night, because people want to know if that's happening in their neighborhood or their moms or their aunts. And as much as we put a focus on the good news, we absolutely have to share the bad news too. But it's how we present it. We try and...
Absolutely. And like, I've always kind of wondered if... It feels to me like that's the same sort of ideas. No one slows down in traffic to look at the guy helping the lady across the street. Everybody slows down to see the car crash. It's a weird thing about us that we want to sort of see things that scare us. And I wonder what is that impulse that we have to sort of thrive on or obsess about something that's more negative, because I always wonder if all conflict disappeared, what would happen to journalism?
Oh, we would find plenty of stuff to talk about.
So?
There are so many different flavors of journalism. I've always thought if I ever won the lottery, I'm going to move to Walla Walla, buy a public access channel and do local news, but Colbert style.
Okay.
Because a newsroom could be a gruff place.
Yeah.
You have to deal with a lot of ugly things in the world. And sometimes there are jokes that will never... Maybe not jokes, but way we present it to one another that wouldn't make it, but I think Colbert would appreciate.
Yeah, that's that kind of journalism well, do you call that journalism? Like
Absolutely.
Colbert or
Don't
John
you?
Oliver?
Yeah.
Yeah, but in a way, I mean, it wouldn't be a place where I would necessarily go to gather,
Hopefully
information, I
that's
guess.
the thing. Hopefully everyone is getting their sources from multiple different places, because that's part of the problem today. You can get it in whatever color you want on your cell phone. So they don't need to tune in at 5 and 6. Actually, we know, because digital is so important these days, they've likely seen this story already. They already know about it. So it's being that person that they want to watch, being that personality is a big part of it. And people already know all this information and got it from the source that they wanted to hear it from, with the sway if it has it.
Right.
So
that definitely feels true to me, that everybody sort of checks their phone to see what's going on in the morning, and then they or they see a news alert come through, Twitter or Facebook or whatever it is that they use, and then they will go to their preferred media outlet to see kind of like, how should I feel about this? Mm-hmm. People go to outlets that sort of confirm their own narrative on it, right? And they will go to these outlets to determine how outraged they should be about a particular issue, right? So, how long have you been a journalist?
15 years.
15 years. So that's changed dramatically for you with the advent of social media, right?
Yes.
So at this point now, you can know anything you want at any time. We don't have to sit around and wait for the news in the evening to figure out or to hear what's going on. What is your opinion of the future of your particular area of journalism, like the local nightly news, with the advent of, TikTok?
I wish I was better at that.
Yeah, at TikTok?
Are you?
No.
Going back real quick, though,
Yeah.
I think it's good that people have so many options, despite my private opinions on some, because people should be getting news from multiple different sources and try and piece it together for themselves, because that's the best any of us can do with any issue, especially when it's polarizing. As for the future of news right now, with the advent of social media and platforms like TikTok that are busting into the digital space, we're really trying to move into that. I feel lucky to work for a locally owned family company. So it's based up in Spokane, but like, we know the owner, she comes down. That's really special. Most news agencies are part of giant conglomerates these days, hundreds of news stations. That's a scary thing for journalism moving forward. But we're trying really hard to move into that digital space. So if you get our app, we'll send you alerts all day long. Be happy to just blow up your phone with things that are happening in the community. Mm-hmm. But also, we're doing little bite-sized newscasts that hopefully we can get the younger generation to watch. So throughout the day, we're updating it with 3 to 5 minute newscasts where we anchor it, run it. We're our own little directors on it. It's really kind of fun, actually. Yeah. And so we're just trying to move into that digital space to be able to be needed as far as what it used to look like and what it's turning into. And it's so surprising, because ever since I started in news 15 years ago, they had said, things are changing with everything turning digital. And now, right now, it's actually happening. So it's fun to be in it.
Do you get access to, or are you presented with demographic numbers as far as viewership for?
Absolutely.
What is the younger than me? What is the younger than 30s doing?
Social media.
Yeah.
Social media, not Facebook.
Not Facebook.
A lot of YouTube. YouTube is by far the biggest.
YouTube feels odd because, you can do sort of YouTube live. You can do that if you want to, but it's, the amount of time it takes to kind of edit something together, and how quickly the world is changing, how quickly like the news cycles are changing, whether it's political or whether it's on a national level or a local level. That seems like an odd place for them to get it, because they're also not really listening to radio.
Nope.
So,
and not even podcasts as much. When I go into like high schools and speak with them and I get all excited to tell them I have a podcast, like 3 people care.
So then that's an odd sort of condensed subset of the population. If people younger than me and you aren't watching it or listening to podcasts, and people older don't really know what they are either.
Is it just us?
Yeah. Is it only like this demographic that's listening to it? And like, that seems odd to me that they wouldn't take in
And I hope they do someday. Maybe they're just not used to radio being a type of media that they do consume because they're missing so many incredible stories. I love podcasts.
How'd you decide you wanted to be on TV?
It was pretty much well, not necessarily on TV. I always wanted to be a journalist. I actually started in radio. And then I was working part-time at a TV station doing like the graphics and then eventually producing, and realized you could tell a story so much more with a visual element.
Right.
So I switched over into TV and ended up being an anchor because of my sparkling personality, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just charm led you there. The camera found you.
I just love journalism. I like to tell stories, and I really love the video element of it. So I'm glad the Real Ones incorporates that.
Yeah. Well, so can you think of a time where we touched on this briefly, but can you think of a time where you had to read something that you completely, well, I guess you don't really share opinions, but
no, it's in my contract that 24/7 I am a representative of the station. Hey. So you won't see me getting wild at bars or anything like that.
Privately, like a friend asks you your opinion on.
So I'll talk to my friends, of course, but more often than not, I just try and keep that down the line.
Okay.
Even with my family, just because we're so polarized within ourselves, it actually just works better. I think a lot of people make those choices with their families anyway. I just have an even better reason.
Is that hard, or are you well practiced in it?
Well practiced. And honestly, a lot of those polarizing things, I don't want to get in a fight with someone about it. And I probably could with some people I know. But why? Like we talked about a little bit, it's human nature to have such polarized ideas on things. There's going to be people on each end of the spectrum in any situation, and we're not going to be able to change some people's minds. Most of the time, you won't. So why not just live and let live? Yeah,
for sure. And like, okay, so I remember one time specifically, my internet went out. I had to call Ziply Fiber, okay? And I called a lady in, they connected me to a woman in South Carolina or Georgia? I can't remember specifically where she was. And it was about 11 o'clock here. So it was about 2 o'clock in the morning where she was. And we had the most pleasant interaction while we were just trying to figure out what was going on with my internet. And I think that she was happy to speak to somebody, because that job would be awful. It would just, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and everybody that calls is of course angry because their computer isn't working. And they, I'm sure a non-zero amount of them take it out on that person. So we were talking about, everything while she was trying to run diagnostics remotely and stuff like that. We just had a very, very pleasant interaction. But that person and I, more than likely, had a different opinion, whether it was about politics or whether it was about other current events or whatever. But what I learned kind of in that moment was that if we didn't discuss those things, everyone's great. Like almost everybody's great. And this goes back to what I was saying before about how we seem to be trending in the direction, or the data shows, notwithstanding, I don't know if you can talk about Ukraine. I'm not here to talk about Ukraine, but I'm going to mention Ukraine. Notwithstanding the conflict in Ukraine, we are safer. There are fewer violent deaths than there ever have been before. But like we said, it's more interesting to tune in to hear about that story than man has nice conversation with Ziply Fiber lady. You know what I mean? So, but what I learned kind of there, and then a couple of other conversations that I've had, if you avoid speaking about the hot button issues, everyone is great. And I kind of wonder if that is because of the internet. I'm wondering if it is because we have access to more the way that different people live their lives. If that's sort of fostered a tolerance that maybe wasn't there before we had access to the way that other people live. And I'm wondering if like the generation after, well, my kids, for example, I'm wondering if they will have will they have a hateful bone in their body, because they will never not know. They will never really have a misunderstanding or I'm sure they will, but they'll never have it won't be mysterious the way that other people live their lives.
Yeah.
So Do you have any concern about the outlook for local media?
That's something we think about and talk about a lot.
Yeah.
And it's been difficult with the rising prices, with inflation. I mean, starting out in journalism, you make pretty much minimum wage. It's getting difficult to even just survive for the people just starting out. So I worry about the caliber of people that come through, just because unless you are from a certain subset of people who have financial backing from whatever ways, and that brings its own way of thinking. It's important for journalism to have so many different thought processes coming into it to be more fair to people that they're covering and people who are consuming that news. So I worry about the workforce. I worry about what it looks like. Hopefully moving into this digital space improves our outlook as far as viewership goes. I don't think it'll ever completely go away. Especially not in a community like this. Call it boring, call it smaller, whatever you want. I call it the biggest small town in the Northwest.
Very conservative.
It's conservative, and there are family types here, and a lot of people retired, and those are the kinds of people that like to consume local news. So I think we're fine for a while, but it is going to look different over time.
Do you think there's any responsibility in the media or
the media?
I know. It's a weird. I said the media. I've said narrative several times. I've said several sort of buzzwords. Hopefully, you know what I mean. Like the journal. What's the preferred?
Journalism is my preferred.
Within journalism, do you think is there a responsibility to try to be a unifier of people?
I don't think so. I think the responsibility is to inform people. We have no control of whether they're unified. We have no control of what they think of something. We're just giving you the facts. Hopefully that unifies people in being a more informed and positive society, but it does not always work like that, as we know.
Why do you think it is that people can't agree on what's true?
Well, think about that. So I am bound by presenting the facts from the U.S. government because that is the openly believed source. But there are people, especially here, a lot of places like this, who don't believe the CDC or Dr. Fauci or the Department of Justice or any governmental agency. But that is who I am required to get my facts from. So if you don't believe them to be a scientist that you're going to trust, you got to find your other sources too and look at all the angles and figure out what you really believe.
Very, very. Is there ever any anger directed at you about that specifically?
Yes.
There's anger directed at you.
We had someone come up and break into the live shots during the Fred Meyer shooting situation. Yeah, people break into live shots while we're talking about a tragedy in the community to be like, did you see the body in there? Is it real?
What?
And we're like, sir, please don't impede our jobs to tell the community what is happening here right now. And yeah, we had to call in the police.
I wonder what would they think the point would be of faking a murder at Fred Meyer? What would be
people that go that extreme to dislike the media?
Right. Okay. So, okay. Because
he doesn't believe anything we say, whether it's from the CDC or from the Richland Police Department. If we didn't see it with our own eyes and understand it, which how many of us can be an expert in absolutely everything, right? So we're going to go to the people we choose to trust as a society. Yeah. Because they have the credentials.
Yeah. It makes sense to me, obviously, that you would trust doctors, for example, not to I said that as a rule, we kind of don't dive into these, that there are other, but I'll say it since we're on this trail here, that I don't think that we are as divided as the media would have you believe. Knew it was coming. Would have you believe. Because I think that not you, but like national media, there's something to gain from keeping people divided, or at least having the illusion that we're more divided. But I think we're talking about a very, very small minority of people, but they're a very, very vocal minority of people who want there to be a divide between people. And I wonder what that impulse is. Like, why is it that we thrive on that? Last week, we had a guy on named Coyote Peterson. You ever heard of him?
No.
He's a pretty big YouTube dude, but he got famous by getting bit and stung by like the craziest insects in the world.
What?
And he's really what he is essentially he's a wildlife educator. He's like effectively running a children's show. My daughter watches this video he did about like sea creatures. She watches it every night. What made him famous, he was making those and he had reasonable success, but then he started getting stung by things called executioner wasps. Oh. And he did this thing called a bee beard where he put a bunch of bees on his face, and then there was like an Africanized bee that got into the beard, and then they all started stinging his face.
Oh no.
Yeah. Like crazy. He goes through like a ton of pain. And I asked him what he thought it was that makes people want to watch somebody in excruciating pain. And what he said is it's kind of like a car crash, that like there's an intense curiosity about the worst case scenario, and to be able to watch somebody else live through it so that you don't have to. There's like, we all fear being in a car crash. We all fear death to a certain extent, right? To be able to, there's a weird impulse that we have to want to watch, there's a weird curiosity that we have about our greatest fears and watching somebody else go through them. What led me down that tangent? What were we talking about?
Were we talking about TikTok?
No, just the media and how people...
The media. Is that a pet peeve for you? The media?
I mean, yeah, but I guess there is how else do you all encompass it?
It has a negative...
But that's the thing. I think you were going off on how like National likes to divide people, and there are ugly things in the world. They like to see it.
There it was.
But that's the pinnacle of what the hill I will die on.
Right.
It's that local media, not social media. Yeah, social media, local media, and national media are all incredibly different things, especially that line between national and local.
Do you find yourself... Do you watch a lot of national media?
Not as much anymore. I used to wake up and watch the Today Show every day, and I've even gotten away from that. So I don't watch a ton of national media just because at 5 and 6, when they come on at 5:30, I'm busy. I can't even watch the competition locally. I wish I had more time to do that. I should just take a vacation and spend my whole time watching other news to see what it looks like.
Do you... Yeah, I wonder about that because like a chef, for example, they spend their whole day cooking. They don't really feel like going home to cook,
Right.
So
I like to watch other news when I am traveling, like in Montana or something. Be like, how's this local news look?
Yeah. Are you good at... People must ask you questions. People must ask you questions that you don't... and I don't mean to paint it like you have to kind of put a...
I'm not fake.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, I'm not trying to paint it that way, but you're sort of calculated in the way that you will respond to certain things. And I think that is, I don't think that is fake. I think that's integrity. I don't think that every issue that somebody has needs to be a hill that they die on, right? So I don't think everything needs to be an argument. And I think that there need to be people who sort of, what they do is inform and don't editorialize, right? So... But have you always had a skill for dancing around?
I don't think so.
Is there any training for it?
No, not necessarily. Just on the job. There are lots of conversations about, remember, we don't talk about the upcoming election and who you're voting for when we walk through the store. I remember when I was a production assistant back at a small news station in Idaho, I came to work on an election day with the person I was voting for on a t-shirt. And I look back on that and I thought, I know I was just behind the scenes then, but I can't believe they did not send me home.
Right.
Like that's the spit. So it's definitely a learned behavior that I've gotten, a muscle I've strengthened over the years.
You a sports person?
Not necessarily. I like to play more than I like to watch.
Have you ever watched Russell Wilson in a press conference?
Yes.
Okay, so that man, that's a masterclass of saying a lot of words that don't mean anything.
Is that what I'm doing?
No. No, he's the person I always think of when I think of like a very calculated sort of political answer for someone who's not a politician, right? So someone will ask him a question and he will talk endlessly until your brain just kind of runs out of, and maybe this is sort of hatred now that he's gone. I can share all of my negative opinions about him now that he's not my quarterback. But yeah, he was, I'm terrible at that. I'm terrible at dancing around. I think of like a press secretary, for example, whenever they're asked a question, they have those binders in front of them for like, they sort of have probably a good idea of which outlet is going to ask them which question and what the hot button issues are right now. But I would be so bad at that with somebody asking. I am terrible at not sharing my opinion about something. You know what? That's not true. I do that at work. Like there's sort of like, I obviously, like everybody, I have my own political leanings, but like my philosophy about it is that, and I guess this could seem sort of cold or calculated, that like, I don't feel like blowing up a transaction over something political, right? And maybe that's selfish.
No, I think it's important for people to be able to talk about things and be able to see it from other people's perspectives. It's more important to be well-rounded in your opinions and your thoughts on something. If you have a conversation with someone and you disagree, it's probably more healthy for your brain to be able to bounce that idea around. Even if you don't eventually change your mind, at least you hear another person's point of view.
Are you ever frustrated?
Of course, I'm a human.
Right. So the reason I ask is like, has that sort of calculated, sort of apolitical way of communicating, has that bled into your sense of self, I guess? Has that, like, do you have strong opinions about something that it frustrates you that you can't share?
Not necessarily. I'm also sort of a private person, so I think it's okay. I mean, some of my friends, I wouldn't talk about some things that I do feel pretty strongly about. And again, why?
Yeah.
You can know which way I lean, but I don't want to like dig into it for reasons that you don't necessarily need to know.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if that sort of fear about it is based on something that would, or what somebody else might think of your opinion, right? Or like whether they would choose to work with you or want to be your friend anymore if you shared that you disagreed with them about something. I wonder if that's based in reality or if that's based on a perception that's brought about by
it could be clouded by 15 years of journalism.
Yeah. No, I want to backtrack a little bit because I was very, very interested in the idea that there would be any hatred thrown at somebody who was not sharing any opinion. That what you guys do is just share. I mean, it's a teleprompter, right? Like you don't write any of that.
I do.
You do?
I do. So, they'll take a story. Producers, so how it works, I write some stuff, producers write some stuff, reporters write their stuff. I check pretty much all of the scripts. So sometimes if we get something from like NBC National, you can feel the tilt in the story. So I will rewrite it to a point that I feel comfortable.
Oh, do you?
I don't just rip and read. I do go through my scripts ahead of time and make sure it's something that I would actually say in the voice that I would say it.
Right. So you'll receive something from NBC National that like they want you to say, or
not necessarily. We have this database that we use where it has regional, national, international stories, space stories, even intergalactical stories. And we can take from there. So everything's pulled from different stations around the world and from NBC National, and we get to choose. Some companies that I won't name, there is a local station, are forced to read some things and air certain stories, and they do catch a lot of flack for them for that. And I do feel bad for them because it's not by any fault of their own. It's because they work for this giant media conglomerate.
Yeah. Have you ever seen videos of like local news? They all are repeating verbatim the same kind of...
That's the same company that forces them to run those stories.
Yeah. And you are not a part of that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, honestly, I've thought like if I had to, I don't know. Some people did leave their jobs when that happened, and it would have to be something I seriously thought about because that is ugly.
Right.
In the world of media, where we should be a part of the check and balance system, where you're being forced to say something like that. That was a tough one to stomach as a journalist, just seeing it happen to people I know.
What do you think is, you mentioned that you don't really have any concern over local journalism particularly going away. But what do you think is the future? Because like the attention spans are getting shorter, right? Which could be a good thing for local media because you guys are just talking, you're not on all day, right? So what do you think the future is?
There are so many options. And again, like I said, in my company that's family owned and local, they let us try a whole lot of different things. I expect things like the later shows that are viewed a lot less. Far fewer people are awake at 10 and 11 to watch those shows than they are at 5, 6, or from 4:30 in the morning till 7 a.m. So just because of the way society works, right? So my thought is potentially like those evening shows could be condensed or done more regionally for a lot of different places. And then maybe adding something like noon shows where, a lot more people are working from home. If there was like a noon lifestyle show where people found out about things going on in the community, not necessarily hard news, scary stuff in the world, but things going on. So I think just moving into different spaces that perhaps local news hasn't been before will help. And doing those digital bite-sized newscasts. We're not on YouTube, but we are on our own platform. So we're hoping people will join us there. They want to hear stories from their community, though, I think is the backbone of what it is and what will keep us going.
So that is something that I would tune into, right? So there are a few daily news podcasts that I listen to that are very, very short. We're talking about like 15 minutes or something like that. It seems like the snippets would make quite a bit of sense to condense those things down a little bit to
a more digestible, like people don't have a half an hour sometimes to sit and watch the evening news.
No.
When they are, we know that they have their cell phone in their hand or they're eating dinner or making dinner. They're not focused. So like if we have a suspect's picture, we'll be like, come here, look at your screen. If we really want someone to see it, we're asking them to come look because we know they probably aren't watching.
Well, at TikTok, again, I'm not on TikTok, but I understand. Well, I watch TikToks my wife sends me. I think they can be 3 minutes long. I mean, they're an NBC Right Now TikTok. Does it exist?
I'm not sure we have one for the station.
TikTok.
Well, I have one, but I haven't even been sucked in a rabbit hole yet. It just doesn't strike my fancy.
Yeah. Well, and like it seems to me like by the time anybody catches up to what the current social media thing is, there's another one like Facebook was so cool when I was in college, right? It was like you done with MySpace, like, but then right before that, MySpace was so awesome, and then like Facebook had a decent run, and then Instagram shows up, but those are completely different kind of things. I guess it seems to me like your instinct there is correct of sort of condensing down a little bit to. The game would need to be reaching a younger generation, right? So, but I wonder what that looks like, because it seems like the answer is condensing it, and younger generation isn't really watching. Well, it's really TV. Like it's. I just wonder what the what the correct way to sort of approach them would be, and it really makes me uncomfortable as a dad that the answer seems to be every bit of information needs to happen in 30 seconds or less.
Right. Yeah. But they get it from a lot of different sources if they are doing it on TikTok or something. I'd love to know what these sources are. But one of my friends says, what is he, 10 or 11? And she asked him something about Ukraine, or they heard it on the radio or something. And then they ended up having this long conversation about what was going on in Ukraine. And she said he knew more than she did from watching clips on YouTube and TikTok. And so they are curious about what's happening in the world. I just hope the sources they're getting it from are reliable.
Right. It's very, very easy for somebody to only be informed to the extent, and I include myself in this as well. There have been several times where I thought I knew something, and then it turned out that, I didn't have the whole picture because of the media I was taking in, right?
Mm-hmm. The more the merrier with the media, I'm telling you.
Right. So I was talking to my cousin the other day about January 6th. And he wasn't aware of several of the things that went on that day. And again, I'm not trying to dive into the politics of something like that. But there were several elements of that day that he wasn't aware of. He genuinely believed that it was a peaceful protest. He didn't know a lot of the things that actually went on that day. He didn't know that they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence." He didn't know that they brought gallows. And whether somebody believes that those were actually intentions that the choose a word carefully, protesters had, or those were just sort of dramatic demonstrations, he wasn't aware of them. He wasn't aware that any of that had happened at all. What he had seen was the pictures of people walking through the hallways, because there were shots of people calmly walking through the Capitol building. And if that's all that you saw, you would wonder what all the hullabaloo was about why people thought that was such a consequential day in American history. If you are not getting the full picture of something, it would be very easy to go back to what I said before, I guess, to feel like there's more of a divide than there actually is.
Sure.
But I guess that's why I asked you before about a responsibility. What was the coverage locally of that day like?
Our newscast got blown out. The National took over.
Oh, okay.
We didn't cover it until the next day.
Didn't cover it until the next day.
And then, it was a lot of talking to our local representatives that were there. People connect to the people that they know, people more like them, so that we wanted to hear from our constituents, right? Or our congressmen and women that were there. And then just fact, this is what happened. The great thing about today's society with social media is you can get on there and see people on the ground, protesters, whatever you want to call them. You can find videos on Twitter and see it for yourself. So I just hope your cousin can utilize those resources, because on the ground journalism from people that are there is so valuable in today's world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But even then you can
shoot the angle, make it look like how you want it to look.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there are going to be lots of different people doing that. So again, consuming as much of it as possible, as not to overwhelm yourself, will give you the best chance of a more well-rounded perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And was there any? Yeah, that makes sense. The National would be. What's that like, actually, when something big happens and they're just like, you don't have to come in today? We're going to be showing.
No, I mean, we worked all day. It wasn't until 5 minutes before that we knew that we were going to be blown out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of frustrating. And it was just a weird, emotional day.
Yeah. It was a weird, emotional day. And we talked about witnessing a car crash or a guy getting stung by whatever earlier. But I remember what I was feeling while I was watching that was not that I wanted anybody to get hurt. But I was watching that, when it started to wind down, I was disappointed in a weird way. I didn't, obviously I have no interest in people getting harmed by it, but it was we're in the middle of a very strange time of life, and the greatest TV I've seen in 2 years, or a year at that point. How long had it been?
Almost a year.
About a year, yeah.
Except for Tiger King. That was up there.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that. The pandemic, the beginning of it, when I think about the what it felt like to start, there's a color in my mind. I remember it like I remember a smell or a color or something like that.
Wow.
Because my daughter had just started. She's about 4, so she just really started kind of walking.
Oh.
So yeah. So everybody was home. So what they were doing in my neighborhood, they were all painting rocks and leaving them around for people to find and stuff like that. And my daughter just really loved doing that. But I remember the beginning of it very, very fondly because of that. So going through all that and like a lot of uncertainty throughout that whole time and like wondering what was going to happen with work or businesses I cared about or like and on top of that, obviously not to mention people's health, my family's health, and to after a year of that, to watch that chaos where they just kind of started like, are we serious? Like they're storming the Capitol building. And like, again, not to say that I wanted anybody to get hurt, but it was fun. Like, and obviously you can't say that. And I don't mean to say that like the consequences and everything were good, but it was entertaining.
And you said that earlier. I don't think everyone is like us that likes to look at the car crash as we go by. Yeah. A lot of people will turn their heads.
Yeah.
And even at work, my coworkers will be like, you missed it. You would have loved it. We had 3 breaking news things right back to back. And they're like, we know you don't love that like someone died or whatever. But like I do get energized in those high stress situations where I'm trying to pull all the information. They do turn to me because I get excited, not about what's happening, but about something's happening and I get to pull it together and try to digest it for somebody.
Okay.
But I don't think everyone is as into.
See, I don't know.
We should do a poll.
Well, yeah, I know. Like, people's level of excitement.
And you're right. Yep. Excitement is a tough word, but there is a level of energy that.
Well, hopefully you know what I mean. That like,
I do.
It's a thing that's happening. It's a sensation of it, like you feel alive a little bit, like but
when the Ukraine war started, my husband and I both got COVID at the end of February.
Okay.
I think he watched like 28 hours straight of Ukraine coverage.
Yeah.
I was like, boy.
Well, and to not to dive into politics, here we go. There has been less going on during this administration. There was always something happening, whether you liked him or you hated him. During the Donald Trump administration, there was something happening all the time. And I'm wondering if that was part of did you notice, like during the previous administration, did you notice a difference in ratings compared to now?
I would have to look back. Not that I'm aware of. We have seen dips in national ratings since then. People really saw the polarization in different larger mediums. And yeah, they took a big dip. At one point, they were talking about dropping the NBC from our NBC Right Now and just being like local right now or something because people associate it so negatively with some of the larger media groups.
Yeah.
So,
well, same deal with Fox, right? So
exactly.
Like if you're watching a football game on Fox, that's not Fox News,
right?
But it's the same sort of umbrella company, right? Mm-hmm. There was discussions about dropping that name and that's because of the politicization.
Absolutely.
Politicization.
Yes.
Politicization. The politics of it?
Yes, it was.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. Like that. I mean, that makes sense to me, but that's sort of what's happened up at the top, right? Like you guys aren't trying to spin any kind of agenda, but it's very, very clear agenda. I'm full of buzzwords. But up at the top of those industries, there's a very clear effort to tell a different story.
But initially, like when pandemic started and the old administration was in there, local news got a huge bump.
Local news
because, I think because people were stuck at home more, they were more concerned about their local COVID numbers or how people were helping in their communities. Always look for the helpers, right? Yeah. But then after a while, like everyone got overwhelmed, whether it was politics or pandemic politics. It took a big dip, but now we're evening back out.
I remember watching coverage on what I do when I watch national media is I try to spread it out. I try to see what they're saying over here and see what they're saying over here, and then I don't know, decide how I feel about whatever. Like, because the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, right? Or not. But I remember watching, in particular, MSNBC during the last election, and there was like a sort of an elation. Obviously, like they're journalists, have their own bent, right? But I remember watching them thinking like, this is going to be not good for the ratings at MSNBC.
Yeah.
Like I think the best thing for them is to have a controversial Republican, because everybody wants to watch again. They tune in to see the car crash and tune into their preferred media to see how they're supposed to feel.
Or get affirmation for it, because they choose whether to turn on Fox or MSNBC, right?
Everybody tends to kind of go to get their opinions about something. They tend to go to a place that confirms what they believe. I don't know. I struggle to with the idea of whether that should or should not exist, or whether it's irresponsible, or whether maybe it would be for the best if everybody just sort of viewed them as entertainment. And I don't mean to single like any one out, but the political entertainment is obviously, well, we talked about Colbert a little bit. That's become political entertainment. I guess he always has been, but like, but I'm interested in your idea of kind of doing a news sort of Colbert style news thing. But why Walla Walla?
Oh, well, I really love Tri-Cities initially just because I could have a winery too with like TV names like Promo, Syrah. I don't know. I could think of more clever things. So then I could also do like drink wine during my newscast, like Hoda. I'm wondering, I've always kind of had the opinion that like broadcast, like sports broadcast there should be an option to have a broadcast that's profane. Like one that's maybe it's two fans or a few fans, I guess, of each team that get increasingly more and more drunk as the game goes on. I would watch that over, just a normal sports broadcaster, at least periodically, but. Be interesting. I'm sure the FCC has rules against that in some faction.
What? I mean, drunk news. Does that exist already?
I mean, probably. It's 2022.
Well, we were talking about what the way forward is.
That could be it. I'm out, though.
Okay. Drunk TikTok news. Okay. Well, I mean, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
It's nice to meet, a professional in like our amateur.
I told you the studio's nice, actually. Way better mics than we have.
Does it really?
You should come help us with our setup.
Hey, I'm on my way. As long as you said it, there's no drinking. Okay.
No drinking.
No drinking. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what time is it? 5 o'clock somewhere.
See you at 5.
See you at 5. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.